Hello and welcome to a new episode of Everstage's Go to Master Show, Season 3. We converse with RevOps and GTM leaders from some of the most successful companies today and learn from their unique stories. Joining us today is Tyler Will, VP of Revenue Operations at Intercom. Thank you for being here today, Tyler. Could you please share a little bit about yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, of course. As you said, I'm the VP of Revenue Operations at Intercom. For those of you listening who don't know Intercom, we are the leading AI agent and platform for customer service. Been around for about 13 years at this point, so check it out. I've been at Intercom for 2 years, leading the RevOps team there. Prior to that, I had a bunch of different roles in sales strategy and ops at LinkedIn. And even before that, I worked at Bain & Company as a consultant, focused mostly on go-to-market strategies for tech companies, which is how I ended up in this world. When I am not at work, I keep busy. I got 3 boys, so we're playing sports, hiking, reading, building things, trying to keep the house from being destroyed, that good stuff. So it keeps me very busy, and yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Tyler, you've had an incredibly rich journey across consulting, LinkedIn, and now leading RevOps at Intercom. Can you walk us through your career path and what drew you into GTM strategy and operations?
Yeah, absolutely. I started my career after college working at an economic consulting firm called Bates White Economic Consulting. And that was really my first, not only professional experience, but first serious exposure to data-driven analysis, to building models, to working with clients and having to give recommendations. And so even though the questions I answer today are totally different things than what we were working on there, that was such a wonderful foundation of thinking about how do you communicate effectively, how do you collaborate with all different types of people, PhDs and data scientists and expert witnesses and things, managing people, managing projects. And so that's really where I got started in this kind of world of analytics and data and advice type business. I went to business school after that, which is how I ended up on the West Coast, which exposed me to tech companies and Silicon Valley. So I had a chance coming out to join Bain & Company after graduating, where I worked on a number of go-to-market strategy projects with tech companies here. We covered pricing, partner strategy, partner programs, did a whole Salesforce redesign with territories and capacity planning and the thing about quotas and all kinds of analysis of that for the EMEA market there, which was really interesting. And that was really what first exposed me to these go-to-market challenges and the problems that I really enjoyed solving. I liked the people I worked with. I liked thinking about these kind of problems. I liked the combination of data and the sort of soft skills, like understanding motivations of salespeople and sellers and the product in the market. So it was really exciting. Really enjoyed doing that. But all that led to 12 years of consulting work, and I needed a change. So I decided to go into industry and try an operating role, which is how I ended up first at LinkedIn. And I ran a few strategy and ops teams there for sales development, for the LinkedIn Learning business, for the Talent Solutions business, in an SMB role that we stood up. And got to the point where I was ready to sort of lead my own org. So I was looking for a new role and found Intercom. It's been an incredible journey here for the last 2 years. It coincided with kind of the launch of Gen AI, or at least the very public launch of Gen AI, obviously influencing customer service quite a bit. And so it's been fun to do that, be there for the launch of Finn, which is our AI agent, and just continue to evolve this and face these challenges. So it's always exciting, always dynamic, and that's what keeps me going in this world.
It sounds like foundation is everything, and you kind of touched upon AI, which we'll get in a bit. You spoke about your early exposure to GTM strategy at Bain, whether it was helping redesign the European sales team or diving into pricing and channel partner strategy. Later at LinkedIn, you built GTM orgs from the ground up for SMBs. What specific challenges did you face in scaling these systems, like territory designs, quota setting, or team structure? How did you go about solving them?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think every company ends up being a little different in what the perfect answer is. So try to go back to some principles or some frameworks, and one of the things that's nice about being at a LinkedIn or working with the kind of customers that Bain does is they tend to be already at scale, and so you kind of see that in practice and see what's out in the world working or not working, and then when you're at a smaller place like Intercom, try to either replicate or avoid making the same mistakes. But when you're thinking about setting up a system that's going to scale, I think first and foremost, we want to make sure we're really clear on what the strategy is, because you want your structure and your systems and everything to support that strategy. So make sure you're aligned with that really closely. And then trying to set some kind of rules or principles that are going to guide our work. And so, as you talked about things like territory design and quota setting, I sort of you try to create some system that you think is going to work for the stage you're at now, and also you can grow into it. So things like segmentation when we're setting up that SMB business, being really clear on, what accounts are going to go to what teams, and how do we enforce that. Um, there's always going to be I've got to keep this account, or I don't want this account. It should go here. It should go there,
Yeah.
and you know, it's not scalable, especially at a LinkedIn size. But even at an Intercom size, if you start having everything be personal favors, and I feel emotionally attached to this customer, I can't possibly move them to the mid market segment out of SMB. And so, being really tight on kind of, here are our rules. Here's how we're going to impose those rules. Are we going to have exceptions for a period of time, or a limited number of exceptions, or whatever those are? Be willing to have the hard conversations and sort of deal with some like temporarily suboptimal outcomes to try to get you in a system that can actually grow and you can build on. So that's one in segmentation. Um, it's harder in smaller companies. For people listening who are doing my job at a very small company, like it can feel personal. It's like, I know all 10 of these people. When you move accounts around or tell them they're in a different segment, it isn't just a big system like at LinkedIn or some of our Bain customers, but it feels like, oh, you're taking my accounts. Oh, no, they're not your accounts. They're the company's accounts, and you have to remember that in this job. Um, Territory planning, kind of the same story. Like, not only the rules, but then how do you create models and processes that let you do this really efficiently? You hear these companies doing this in Excel, but at both LinkedIn and at Intercom, we've built book carving tools that automate a lot of this, and they let you put in, what your priorities are, which often leads to a really good strategy conversation with your go-to-market leaders. What do we want to do? What do we want to prioritize? Is that everybody's got an equally balanced book? Is it we want to keep accounts with their current owners so that we don't disrupt relationships? Is it we want to introduce a new vertical strategy and we need to bring that in first and foremost? What's the balance? And so you can do that, and if you build a model that actually does that, and we have our data scientists who've really led this work, then you can sort of tweak your parameters and hit run and see what comes out, and see how you feel about that, and iterate on it. And that lets you run whether we've got 60 account managers at Intercom or 600 at LinkedIn, you can sort of use that system and use it over and over again at scale as you grow. And so encourage people, like, find those ways to automate it, to have rules that are implemented that way, not some poor analyst going through hundreds and hundreds of rows of an Excel file going, Sally gets this one and Betty gets this one and Sam gets that one. And, it's going to be awful. So those models, those automations are key. And likewise for quota setting, how do you think about what's our plan? What's our incentive design? What do we want to have? What's the data infrastructure we need to build that? And then what are the models we're going to use to run it? So you're not, quota shouldn't be a debate, right? It shouldn't be like, oh, we're never going to do that. We can only do, 70% of that. Like, you want everybody to feel stretched a little bit, but also that it's attainable. And so a good system, good rules, a good model that helps you do it is key. And this is one I think that a partnership with your finance or your business planning or business analytics team, whatever you call it, is really key. So if you're not close to what for us is our FP&A partners, fix that in a hurry, because that's going to really help you scale and run a good planning process that results in a company plan that translates into quotas, that translates into the capacity, all those pieces you need. Is key. Obviously, things change. You need to be dynamic enough, especially at smaller companies. But all that kind of systematized rules, relationships, the foundations, and then the models that let you do it, I think can help you grow without having to scale your RevOps team, sort of linearly with your sales org. Is getting leverage out of those. So really encourage people to do that. I think the other one you talked about was kind of the notion of team structure. Things that work at a really small team suddenly very quickly don't work. And so I think, there's some notion of how do we future-proof some of these ideas? I wonder if org structure is like a fool's errand to try to future-proof too much. You're going to have 8 sellers and they're going to have 3 different roles. That's just going to be one team. Then eventually they're going to grow and split out into specialist teams, and they're going to split out into segments. But I do think it's really important to at least be thoughtful about these, even if you can't necessarily future-proof it. Of we're going to take step A today because that's what we have, and there's the resources. We don't want to have 6 managers for 12 salespeople. But hey, we know we'll carve this one off first, and and sort of divide it up. And what's their 4 or 5 step process can really help you think about a logical path to scaling, and not just random hiring and all of a sudden you've got people spread all over the place and you don't really have a good plan. So just encourage people to think about that one. You probably can't set it up on day one, maybe in the same way you could like a territory model or a segmentation approach. But the team structure itself, I think, is a good like what are our 4 or 5 phases we think we're going to go through, and are we set up to like transition into each of those when the time comes, and do we know what that time is going to look like?
Different growth phases. You've supported both SMB and enterprise teams across different growth phases. When headcount scales rapidly, how do you ensure the sales efficiency doesn't drop off? And what systems or processes have helped you keep things tight as teams grow?
Yeah, there are kind of three things that I thought about and sort of thinking through this question. Like one is the like mental model or understanding of where productivity comes from. So yeah, I'll dig into that. The second is like the analytics, so that you actually know what's going on. It's one thing to say you care about productivity, and another to like measure it and be able to actually see something. And then the rest of the operations that kind of enable it and make it happen. So going through this one by one, the mental model I sort of have is like, where does our productivity come from? And we talk quite a bit about like the 4 channels we have as we think about, say, an account exec out hunting for new business. We got inbound, marketing driven. We've got outbound, when our BDR teams go and prospect into accounts. The A's themselves are doing some prospecting. Then we have channel partners or sort of referral partners sourcing deals and sending things over to us. So like at the beginning, as you think about adding headcount, do you have this model in your head? Like, where do we have more capacity? Where do we have more opportunity? And are we thoughtfully applying this and understanding what it's going to mean? Like, you might have excess demand coming through partners. Great, we can ramp up and sort of what is that going to do to our productivity? So you have a clear sense of what you're signing up for. In a really early stage growth company, obviously inbound feels like it can keep growing forever. But at some point, and certainly like my LinkedIn experience was, that was kind of a fixed pie. Like there weren't lots of other companies about to hear about LinkedIn for the first time. If you missed LinkedIn by 2020, 2022, you were probably never going to find out about it. And so, it was much more like, well, if we're going to add a headcount, there's this fixed pie of what we get through inbound. It's going to be divided more, more thinly to everybody. And so if we're going to add headcount, do we think we can pick it up and sort of make them productive on other channels? So this is like a very different situation. If you're, say, 70% inbound, 20% BDR source, 10% self-source, and how much you think you can add and how productive you can make people versus you got a third from inbound, a third from BDR, a third, self-sourced and partners, like you're going to be able to grow differently. You're going to think about productivity differently. And so starting from that, like kind of like I said, that mental model of where is this even going to come from, and why do we believe the hypothesis of adding headcount makes sense, is a great place to start. And just level set expectations with everybody. Then second thing I mentioned was the analytics. So being really good about the metrics you're tracking, what we're going to look at, what are the baselines for those, so we know, are we dropping, are we increasing, what are we doing, having the right forums to review those. So example, at Intercom, we have kind of 2 things around this. One is pipeline council. We meet every week. We look at a dashboard. We talk about how our various sources and those channels I mentioned are tracking against pipeline targets. That makes us feel really comfortable that we have enough opportunity to add headcount, or we're good, or do we have too many people that there's not enough pipe for them. And so that's a really good review. We're on top of it every week. It gives us a really good pulse of the business in that sense. We also at one point had been making a bunch of changes, like to how we directed leads through our funnel, and we were worried about what the implications of that were going to be on, say, like the SDR team. And so we built a dashboard where we every week we looked at how many MQLs we had and how many SQLs we were generating, and really wanted to be on top of that. So when it came time for a backfill or an incremental headcount, we could say we're at a good spot or we're not at a good spot. And so having those metrics day to daily or weekly operate the business are really important. Longer time frames, we're doing productivity reviews. My team produces they do a light touch every month, and then quarterly, a look back. How do we do against quota attainment? Do we feel we've got more opportunity here? And so that process, and again, that FP&A RevOps partnership of, what's our headcount investment envelope? How do we want to think about this? What are we expecting to grow the business? LTV CAC, you don't want to calculate LTV CAC on a weekly basis. You drive yourself nuts, but you do want to do it quarterly or at least semi-annually, so you have a sense of how you're doing. So that metrics foundation is critical. And then the last piece to making sure we can kind of scale and manage through growth efficiently is all the operational pieces. A big part of this comes down to your enablement team. Are they set up to be successful to onboard new hires? Are they then continuing to the evolution of people? Can they effectively support a team if you've got new product introductions? And so we're lucky we have a great enablement team at Intercom that does a good job of this. We feel confident we can do it, but making sure that's in place, so you're not hiring a dozen people and then they're just like sitting around with no idea how to do what they need to do. We have a good tech stack, right? That's going to help you scale and get people up to speed. If everyone's got to do a manual process, it just slows things down. You think about a deal desk team, like I can handle 10 really ad hoc, crazy manual workarounds. That's fine. We can do that. If the team grows a lot and suddenly need 100 of those every quarter, especially at the end of a quarter, that's suddenly totally untenable. And so how do you make sure all those operational pieces that enable the sellers to be productive are also in place, and you don't get out so far ahead in headcount hiring that when it comes time to actually deliver, everyone's like, I don't have a sales navigator license, I don't have Gong, I can barely forecast, and no one told me what I'm supposed to sell. Like that's a painful place to be. And so making sure all those pieces are there, I think, is the third and final kind of key element to this.
That sounds like a lot of stakeholder management while you build all these processes. You spoke about breaking the sales process down to its bare bones through ride-alongs, time studies, and deeper reviews.
Yeah.
What's your approach when doing that kind of ground-up assessment, and what kinds of inefficiencies do
Mhm.
you usually uncover?
Yeah. So think about that last, like that operational point I talked about. So I think the first thing about these is they can feel very intrusive if you don't do it right. There's sort of the office space, like, what would you say you do here kind of line of questioning, which I think you want to avoid. You don't want to be a know-it-all. You don't want to go in and tell reps that they're doing things wrong. So, curiosity really wins the day on these, and approach it as like, hey, we all want to make this run better. How can we collaborate and make it happen? So just starting with that mindset, I think is really helpful. Um, and then, as you said, they're different. You can do time studies. There are tools to do it. If you want to kind of automate it, you can go around and do interviews. We end up doing that on and off. Yeah, ride-alongs are always helpful. It's something I think RevOps people probably don't do enough of. Like go spend a day in the life of the sellers you're supporting to understand what their experience actually is. It can be, I think, really helpful in both empathizing with them a bit more and also with identifying opportunities. And so, like, you find opportunities and inefficiencies everywhere. Like they're all over the place. And you'd think you go through this process and be like, everything's great now. We fixed all of them, and then you'd go back again and like do it again. It's like I live in San Francisco. It's like painting the Golden Gate Bridge, right? You start at one end, you work your way down. By the time you finish, you got to start over at the other end and keep painting it. It's just an ongoing process as things change. But the biggest place I would encourage people to look for these kind of inefficiencies in places like kind of the seams between two what seem like reasonably well-defined systems or processes. So an example we came across recently that I think we knew is like CSMs, account management, does QBRs for our customers. I think most companies probably do something similar, pretty standard thing. So we're sitting there going, we built all these dashboards and all these reports, and they provide all the data you could possibly need to run a QBR. And we've created this, great template that you can use to run your QBR. Like, ta-da, everything's great, check, like, let's move on. Well, it turns out when you go talk to the reps, it's an excruciating process to filter the data, get it down to exactly what you want it to be for the QBR, and then you're copying and pasting over into this template, and like, does everything fit right? And is it exactly the message you want to land? Really manual process, really painful. And the rep ends up spending all their time filtering, copying, pasting, instead of going, what's my narrative? What's the story I want to go tell this customer? So you might, from an ops perspective, go template plus data equals success. But in reality, like the joining of those two things is where there's a ton of inefficiency. So now we start talking to like our data science teams. Could they automate this? What would it look like if they could pre-populate it? There are tools out there that will kind of wave a magic wand, and suddenly you've got a QBR deck that's built. So you can spend your time doing what actually matters, which is what's the value? How do I have a good value-oriented conversation with the customer? Not let me explain some usage trend data that I copied and pasted out of a chart kind of thing. So we see that over and over again. Things getting handed off between systems, between tools. Process up to a certain point, a new person takes over, that becomes really inefficient. And so those seem to be the places where they're the biggest challenges. And so it encourage people like kind of look at the seams as a great place to find opportunities to improve.
You're leading RevOps in a company that's deeply embedded in the AI ecosystem. What are some ways AI is already transforming how GTM teams work internally? And what do you think the next big shift in AI-driven
Yeah.
operations will look like?
Yeah. Yeah, so we're sort of two versions of this internally of what we're doing. There's what my team is doing, and then there's more like what the sellers and our kind of internal customers are doing. So like Finn, which is our Intercom AI agent product, we're trying to have AI help answer basic questions that tend to bog RevOps teams down. Everybody who's in this in this space knows what's my quota. Explain it to me. What's the rule of engagement on this? What's the policy about that? Like that stuff just piles up and takes up people's time. And so how can we bring in kind of that same customer service mindset that we have at Intercom in our product to some of our internal operations? And so we're using AI to try to answer those questions. That helps us clear up time. That gets automated. Automate some workflows. Click through this and take care of it yourself. Self-serve. So that's really helpful. So we're already busy doing that internally. We've been using that for at least six plus months at this time. It just keeps getting better and better. We're starting to also apply AI more in some of the higher value kind of knowledge work that I think is making our team better and more efficient. So we actually do a thing every month at our team meeting. We had it this morning, conveniently, where we have two people stand up and share what it is they're using AI for in their work. And it's just a chance to sort of propagate best practices and make sure we're sort of walking the walk as well. So you got people talking about, I'm a mediocre SQL code writer. I'm not a data analyst, but now I can use AI to help me write my SQL code and clean up my queries, so I can extract data and self-serve. And that's great for me because I move faster. That frees up our analytics team to work on sort of deeper, more complicated problems rather than being a sort of a troubleshooter on that kind of thing. So we love to see our people take responsibility for doing that. We've got people running their presentations and their comms through it, saying, I'm trying to accomplish, thing X. How is a team going to react to getting this email? And AI does a great job of kind of simulating like what the response might be to something, or pointing out errors or ways things could be softened or sharpened or made clearer. So we're doing a lot with comms on it, and so that's really exciting. Where it's going on this front, like I'd love to see us have it embedded more in Deal Desk. I have kind of this dream of like an AI pricing guru that's like, you should not give that discount on this deal. We looked at all the other deals that looked just like it, and with the sentiment and all the gong calls and all the the CRM information, like there's no reason to give them 40% off. They'll buy at 30, kind of things. Like reviewing MSSA terms or reviewing terms and conditions of the contract. Like there's tons of ways that I think Deal Desk can leverage this and sort of highlight things that are out of line or don't make sense. I think we're going to keep using it for more and more data analysis, presentation of ideas. Like I'm doing some stuff with HR right now around like career development and things, and it's great just to kind of chat away with, with whatever, whatever AI system you're using. To like just help me frame this. What's a good framework for thinking about, IC career development and evaluation? So I think it's just about bringing it into your kind of daily work. That's really, really good, and then just explore, like see what works for people. More broadly, our team is obviously using a lot of third-party tools. Leverage AI, Gong and Clay are two of the ones we use quite a bit. Those are key parts of our tech stack. Heavily using AI that lets us do kind of more thoughtful work, identify accounts better, find patterns in places we'd never be able to find it before. So those are big ones. We hear of our reps using it to research companies and prospects. I think people have all seen demos of like the SDR, BDR agents where they write write emails. No one writes letters anymore. Write emails, sort of outreach or automatic responses. We talked about creating QBRs earlier. I think that's a key thing. We're doing a lot of work right now around like diagnosing the health of customers and then flagging insights about that customer. So next best action kind of recommendations. And I think ultimately we're going to get to a place where there's like a sales co-pilot on almost every call, surfacing information, bringing along the right context, taking notes, reminding you of the next steps at the end, and really simplifying that so that the human's job is the thing that human is really good at, which is connecting to the customer, understanding their pain point and what you're solving and what the relationship is like. And so it's a super exciting time. It's exciting for Intercom and the product we're developing. It's exciting for people in this space who are willing to sort of take a little bit of a risk and experiment with these things. But there's a line that's been going like, remember, this is like the worst AI you'll ever use. And I think that's very true and very important to remember. Is like, it's pretty amazing what it does right now. and it is only going to get better from here. And so the people who are willing to embrace it now are those who are going to get ahead and be really ready as it gets better and better. So all in all, very exciting.
It looks like you're democratizing the usage of AI internally in your teams walking the walk. Are there any specific resources, books, or podcasts you'd recommend for someone looking to scale their career in RevOps?
Yeah, there are a number of things for this, and different people at different stages may benefit from them differently. One, and I think first and foremost, at least in RevOps, is it's actually the human community here. We're like a small but mighty bunch of people out there, and so there's modern sales pros, there's Sharebird, there's Pavilion. Vendors are always hosting dinners and things, and I just encourage people who are passionate about this and want to advance, like, take advantage of that. People in this community are incredibly generous with their time, mentoring, sharing experiences, helping solve problems. And so I just really encourage people to take advantage of that. Like, I've been the beneficiary of it. I've tried to give back. And I think most people feel that way. And so that's first and foremost in my mind. Podcasts, great to go learn from other go-to-market leaders. There's so many out there. There's some RevOps ones. You can go listen to me on a couple of these. But there are so many wonderful, thoughtful people out there that's a great way to kind of get insight that you're not going to get anywhere else. And then the third piece I'd really encourage people to do is, like, read generally about business. I think you cannot be sort of too literate with your general business acumen in this role, even though it's a specific function in an organization. It's so central to go to market. You've got marketing, you've got technology vendors talking to you, you've got data science, you've got all the salespeople and customer success, like all these things coming together and flowing through RevOps. So you're going to get more and more involved as you get more senior, and your ability to talk to the CEO or talk to the CFO or talk to product, talk to engineering people gets more and more important. And so, this is old school, like, go read the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, the Economist, like, go read good business publications. There's so many books about leadership and management and case studies of businesses, like, good, bad, and otherwise, about what to do, not to do. And I think if that stuff gives you energy and excites you, you'll find ways to apply it. It lets you talk to people in different functions in a good way, and it's a sign you're, like, chosen a good career path. You're excited to, like, synthesize all those things and bring them together. So I just encourage people to get out there and explore that stuff.
What are the three key pieces of advice you would like to share with our listeners who aspire to excel in revenue operations?
Yeah, yeah. As always, there are three things. There are three for these answers. So first and foremost, and this applies at kind of any level, whether you're just starting out or you're very, very tenured in a RevOps career, is to take ownership of problems. And what I mean by that is, instead of just answering the literal question, like, put your arms around the whole problem that needs to be solved for the business. Figure out ways to solve it. Bring in other people. It does not mean do it alone. But if something's important, make sure it's getting done. Don't just answer the question. So showing that sort of proactivity, showing that willingness to, like, pull in other people, raise a hand for help to get something done is really important. So that's the first one. Second one is have a point of view. I think too often RevOps teams are kind of task doers, or they follow through and answer a basic question, but our job isn't really to just report data or rehash what we've heard from other people. So an example is, if you're in charge of running the forecasting process, don't just add up all the forecasts you've heard and say, here's our company forecast. What's your point of view about that? Have some own data-driven, experience. I think, well, this person tends to, sort of be really conservative, so we probably need a little bit more for that. And this person tends to be too optimistic. And we, have a perspective on whatever it is you're doing, whether it's forecasting or what your tech stack ought to look like, or what the analytics mean, so that you have a seat at the table and you're a strong voice at the table. I think that's important. Doesn't mean you're always going to be right. In fact, you're quite often going to not have all the context, but the only way senior leaders are going to engage with you is if you have a point of view about things. And so I really encourage people to do that. And then the last is sort of the necessary mastery of analytics, which I think RevOps people tend to do very well. But the part they do less well and need to equally emphasize is the communication of things. I think too often really good work goes unnoticed because it's not communicated in a way that moves other people to action. And so how do you spend time developing the skill, about, like, that craft of actually communicating about the data or the insight or whatever it is you generate? So owning the problems, having a point of view about what you're working on, and being able to communicate it, not just analyze it, I think are the three things that will help people go a long way in this field.
That's gold. Well, that brings us to the end of this insightful episode of Go to Masters. Big thanks to Tyler for sharing his experiences and valuable insights. Remember, you can tune in every week to learn from the game changers driving hypergrowth companies across the globe. Go to Masters is brought to you by Everstage, your trusted partner for transforming the way businesses handle sales commissions. I'm your host, signing off.